Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 175th ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. Are you there, Kyle?
Yeah, I can barely see you, but I'm doing great, Cameron. First of all, how was your Christmas?
It was really good. Very busy. First Christmas with a new baby. So that's a whole new thing. I feel like I haven't slept in a week. And
you look great.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I didn't get very many gifts, but baby got lots of gifts, let me tell you. We counted up from like baby showers and now Christmas and everything. She has exactly 35 baby spoons.
Wow.
So we're not, that's
just for shoveling food in, huh?
Kind of crazy. And we have like 20 bowls and like 8 sippy cups. So we're gonna try to donate a bunch of stuff, I guess.
Well, good news is there's a present on the table, and you could open that.
You know what? Go ahead.
Who's it from?
I don't know. It's a mystery present. Audio listeners, we have this just big bag. It says Merry Christmas on it. And reaching down in, lots of tissue paper.
This is a big bag. It's a large bag. Must be a large present.
Oh, and in here is a trophy. It's the SEC Pick'em Plus Nebraska Championship Trophy. It's got 2018 Cameron Albert champion, 2019 Cameron Albert champion, 2020 Kyle DeVries champion, 2021 the Patreon guest pickers, the champions of the Missouri Sports Podcast SEC Pick'em Plus Nebraska. They will forever be represented on this trophy.
What an honor.
We'll sit it right there on the desk.
Congrats.
Truly an incredible performance, really.
Yeah.
From them.
Multiple players just coming in, getting perfect scores.
Destroying us week in and week out.
Yeah. I guess when you have that many brains working together, good things happen. But also that just speaks to how smart our audience is and how well they know college football.
That's true.
Kyle, we've got a little bit of news. We're going to just kind of do a little bit more recap on the football season as a whole, and then we'll talk about what the basketball team has been up to. But before that, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a rating or review on the podcast platform that you use. And if you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do that on Patreon. You can check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/Missouri Sports Pod. Kyle, first things first. I can't remember when this was announced. It's been a little bit here, but Missouri's getting a transfer from Clemson, a safety coming in next year named Joseph Charleston. And he's actually played a bit for Clemson. I think he was a 4-star recruit out of high school. He's from Georgia, and he'll be a Missouri Tiger next year.
Yeah, I think he played 2 full seasons at Clemson and had, I think, 40 or 50 tackles in 2020. It sounds like this most recent season they had like a super highly ranked freshman come in and kind of take his spot on the depth chart, so he didn't play as much this year, but still sounds like a really good player. I had a Clemson fan respond to our tweet about it and kind of give a little insight. And said basically that he kind of had his job taken on the depth chart by a freshman, but he's a super solid player, and it's a good pickup for Mizzou. So in a position where Missouri could probably use some help next year, that's gonna be nice.
Yeah, it looks like he should have 2 or maybe 3 years of eligibility. 2 at least, 3 maybe 3 with COVID year.
Yeah, just throw out all eligibility with COVID recently. I don't even know where anybody stands anymore, but at least 2 seasons. Yeah. At least.
Welcome aboard, Joseph. I guess that's all for news, really.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit quiet.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the football season now that the bowl game's over. We can just kind of do some reflections. The season hasn't been over very long, but I think it'll be worth it to just kind of get our thoughts out on the season as a whole and kind of Coach Drinkwit's first 2 seasons at the helm. This year, Missouri finished the season 6-7 after the bowl loss. He, in his Mizzou career now, is 11-12 overall, 8-10 in conference play. And then I was kind of just breaking down some of the wins and losses. He's 5-3 in the 2 seasons versus the SEC East, 2-0 versus South Carolina and Vanderbilt, 1-1 against Florida and Kentucky, and 0-2 against Georgia and Tennessee. And then the team in the 2 seasons that he's been the head coach is 2-4 against the SEC West. So feel free to just jump in there with your thoughts on this season and just the Eli Drinkwitz experience so far after 2 years.
After the first year, I mean, we definitely maybe overachieved a little bit in that first season. We beat LSU and Kentucky, and I think that optimism was extremely high after that first season, maybe unreasonably so, and with just some good recruiting numbers that we hadn't seen in a while. I think maybe Coach came back to earth a little bit this season as far as just some of his in-game decision-making and stuff like that. And again, he's only been a head coach for 3 seasons, so sometimes you have to expect some, it seems weird to say growing pains for somebody who's a head coach of an SEC program, but I think that applies for Coach Drinkwitz here. I think he's still going to learn from some of the mistakes he made this year, but, things still seem, as good as ever with the recruiting classes that we have now stacked on each other. The recruiting seems like something that's not going to be a problem for him. I think that's well established. So, but, maybe since last year was overachieving a little bit, this year was maybe what we should have expected a little bit more. I think we were probably a little bit disappointed with the final result compared to our preseason expectations, but
I don't think, obviously nobody expected the drop off on defense. Going from a really solid unit and a defense that won them some games in Drinkwitz's first season to an absolute liability for half the year, and then not awesome but good enough for the kind of the second half of the season this year.
Yeah, I don't know how much you can blame that on Coach Drinkwitz at some point.
No.
Like, the defense was utterly terrible, and that was somewhat out of his control at a certain point. And one thing that we talked about that I think we liked that he did when he got hired was he kept some consistency in the staff. In his first season, he kept Ryan Walters and David Gibbs and some of those guys, and so and he had Nick Bolton. So
that helps.
Some of those things, were very helpful for his first season, and this year was almost like his first season being a coach in some ways because he had to hire a lot of new staff members, and that move was a little more tumultuous than we were expecting, but it ended up working out slowly.
Yeah. No, I think where we ended the season is a much brighter spot than, the first half of the year. It was looking pretty disastrous for quite a while. Because of how bad the beginning of the season was, they still finished just 13th in the SEC in total defense and opponent points per game. Vanderbilt was the only team worse in either of those categories. And then, of course, they finished 14th out of 14 in rush defense because Tennessee ran for, I think, 3,000 yards against Missouri.
Yeah, it might have been more than
that. The offense finished 9th in yards and points per game in SEC play. So not terrible, but room for improvement for sure. We talked about the quarterback situation last week. Bazelak announced he's transferring. So if you missed that or just want our thoughts on the quarterback situation moving forward, last week's episode would be the one to check out. This week I want to talk about the running back room and the wide receiver group. Tyler Beatty is headed to the NFL. That leaves Elijah Young, Michael Cox, and B.J. Harris as far as returning running backs. And then they add Tavoris Jones, who will be a freshman next year. Just obviously the season just ended. Who do you like out of that group? Do you think there'll be kind of more of a two-headed approach? Obviously, when you have a guy like Tyler Beatty, you can lean on him a lot more. I don't anticipate any of these guys averaging 25 plus carries per game.
Yeah, at the beginning of this past season, we would have said that exact same thing with Larry Roundtree leaving. Was this is definitely going to be a committee with Tyler Beatty and Elijah Young and maybe even some B.J. Harris or whoever that third running back was. And then Tyler Beatty came in and had more carries than Larry Roundtree probably did in any of his seasons.
Right.
So that was a surprise. I, of course, definitely don't foresee that happening again next season. I think it for sure will just be a committee. Probably Elijah Young, I would assume, would be the main back. But, judging by what happened in the bowl game, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, his season was kind of weird. It's really hard to know much about any of these running backs because Tyler Beatty, there was games where, like, he carried the ball, 40 times, and we barely saw any other running backs.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like any two of the four could be in the top two next year.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like Elijah Young and B.J. Harris would be, like, the most conventional picks or predictions as far as the top two guys.
I definitely think DeVorest Jones is the highest ceiling of those four guys, probably by a pretty wide margin. I think we'll probably see him some next year. I guess it's possible he could come in and kind of take the lead role. I think we'll always see some Michael Cox too, just because I think he brings something different than any of the other ones. So might kind of continue to see him in goal line situations and stuff like that. But all those guys are capable players. I don't know that you have like an alpha running back in that group, at least maybe not yet.
And if Brady Cook is your starting quarterback, then you're going to have some rushing upside with him as well. Looking at receivers, so the top four receivers in terms of receptions and yardage will all be gone from this most recent squad. And obviously that's Towski Dove, Kiki Chisholm, Tyler Beatty, and Barrett Bannister, although maybe Barrett Bannister has another year of eligibility. That's a big question mark because I feel like he's been here 18 years, but I'm not sure on that one. But I anticipate all four of those guys being gone. And then returning, we would have J.J. Hester, Chance Looper, Mookie Cooper, and Dominic Lovett, which those four right there, that's pretty solid. But then adding true freshman Mekhi Miller, Jamarion Wayne, and Luther Burden to that group, I think I'm pretty excited about the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I think Towski Dove might have 1 year of eligibility remaining. But, yeah, it's going to be some new faces for sure in the wide receiver room. And, I think expectations will be pretty high for that group. It should be interesting to see how it plays out. And there's going to be a lot of explosive athletes, and it just may depend on how quickly the young guys can grow up. And because there's going to be probably a lot riding on those guys, maybe more than the typical freshman receivers. But
you're absolutely right about Dove. He's just listed as a junior. I had him in my head as a senior.
Pleasant surprise then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, considering he was one of the top, most targeted guys, I think we definitely will use him a lot next year. I would say the wide receiver room, I think, has more options as far as just guys you can count on being solid than the running back room.
Mm-hmm.
I feel better about the wide receivers at this point going into next year than I do the running backs.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen flashes from J.J. Hester, Mookie Cooper, Dominic Lovett a little bit. I would be nice with any of those guys being able to take a step because Luther Burden will be relied upon. He may even start, but he's not going to be able to do it himself. There's going to have to be other guys that are a factor there and are able to draw some attention away from him.
Right.
It seems weird. I mean, is he really going to come in and demand attention from the defense from the get-go, do you think?
I don't really think so. I don't think it's possible. I'll say it's possible that they come up with a game plan to target him 12 times a game and, just force feed him the ball and see what he can do.
Yeah.
But that would be such a departure from anything we've seen in the passing game so far under Drinkwitz that I just don't really see that happening.
I think I agree with you.
It seems like
it could get to that point, but probably not immediately.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they get to a point where they pull a Tyler Beatty with Luther Burden and are we're going to just try to get him to touch the ball as many times as possible because he's our best offensive weapon.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, but that's harder to do with a wide receiver than it is an elite running back, in my opinion. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we talked about how they were either last or second to last in the SEC in pretty much every statistical category. They were okay on turnovers, actually, but they will be losing leading tackler Blaze Aldridge, starting defensive back at Caleb Evans, a couple of linemen, Akale Byers and Kobe Whiteside, but they'll be bringing back Martez Manuel, Jalen Carlisle, Chad Bailey, Isaiah McGuire, Devin Nicholson, Chris Abrams-Drain, Trajan Jeffcoat, Makai Wingo, some players that weren't used a whole lot this year. Travion Ford was a freshman. Kyron Montgomery got hurt, so those guys will be looking to contribute more next year. And some really good pieces coming in as freshmen, although I doubt any of them will be, at this point, just forecasting. I don't see any of the incoming freshmen being like immediate day one contributors. Maybe Graciel on the defensive line.
Yeah, he's probably the only one that could do that on the defensive line there. But Makai Wingo, I mean, what he did this year was pretty amazing. I mean, you just don't see that very often.
Right.
A freshman coming in and playing and being like heavily relied upon as a true freshman in the SEC.
And delivering for the most part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he may have been our best defensive lineman by the end of the season, which is just insanity. Yeah. I mean, obviously, losing Blaze, I think, is going to hurt a little bit. I think by the end of the season, he was pretty consistent. But for the most part, I feel like this turnover is pretty good, and get some new faces in there, I think will be really good. It seems like, to me, there's a lot of athleticism. There's a lot of explosiveness and high upside guys on the defense that are kind of will be implemented in over the next season or two. I think there's a lot to like going forward.
I especially like the defensive secondary. I think they were the most impressive, I think, this season. Some big plays out of Chris Abrams-Drain, Jalen Carlisle. Then the defensive line, you might say it can only go up, but I can maybe foresee Isaiah McGuire and Kyron Montgomery providing some pressure off the ends successfully next year. And then if Wingo and Graciel, if Wingo can take a step and Graciel's ready to contribute day one, maybe have a pretty solid defensive line. That's the linebacker spot that obviously is the most worrisome. That was kind of a deficiency for most of the season. Blaze Aldridge was good at times, but also seemed lost. But most of the defense did for the first half of the season. Do you have any hope that the linebacker, is there anybody coming in at the linebacker spot that you think will shore that up at all?
One thing I wanted to add about the defensive line was Darius Robinson was a guy who had like a pretty good season, and I think that he and Makai Wingo could kind of be staples of the defensive tackles next year with Travion Ford or Marquise Graciel, kind of some of those talented guys being mixed in a little bit. But it seems like those two guys are pretty much staples of the defensive line going forward. Now, what was your question to me? I'm sorry.
The linebacker spot. It just has been, since Nick Bolton left, it's been at times a black hole, and at other times it's been serviceable. So do you see next year's linebacking core being closer to black hole or closer to serviceable?
Devin Nicholson's had a little bit of an up and down career. I think he still has another season of eligibility. Has had a lot of playing time. His kind of, I don't know, I think of him maybe a little bit of the old regime, a little bit with Barry Odom years and stuff. I think he's still going to be relied upon pretty heavily. Chad Bailey was a huge bright spot this year, and he'll be back. One guy that you might keep an eye on is Damian Wilson, and he's going to be a redshirt freshman next year, I think. I have pretty high hopes for him as kind of a Nick Bolton mold. He'll probably be more on the inside, kind of a run stopping linebacker, but he's definitely maybe the next linebacker to keep an eye on. And it's still possible that Missouri could look to add a transfer there, maybe the defensive line too, but I'm not 100% sure our current defensive rosters who we'll take into next season.
There's also a redshirt freshman, or will be redshirt freshman, Zachary Lovett.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's kind of an outside linebacker who could definitely mix in as well.
Then what about Charles Hicks? the transfer from Wyoming.
Yeah. I don't know a whole lot about Charles Hicks. I mean, it sounded like he lost a job at Wyoming. So I wouldn't necessarily expect too terribly much out of him, but you never know. And maybe just getting a change of scenery might be good for him. He's definitely somebody who could provide some depth.
Well, it sounds like whoever is the starter day one, if they're not producing, there's at least options behind them. Kyle, I had a funny thing I saw when I was looking at the stats. Can you take a guess which offensive player had the most tackles this year?
Which offensive player? So from like interceptions,
right?
Well, let's think about it. So Bazelak, a lot of his throws didn't go very far, but I still feel like it's got to be like a wide receiver. Actually, you know what? I'll say Tyler Beatty.
You're correct. Tyler Beatty had 3 tackles.
Wow.
Led the offense with 3 tackles. There was I think maybe like Kiki Chisholm and Towski Dove had 2, or one of them had 2. So
he did it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Put that on the Heisman reel.
Okay. Well, that's just a little bit more football season recap to kind of sum up my thoughts on the season as a whole. We kind of predicted that this was possible, that they would just kind of be around 500.
Mm-hmm.
We had hopes that they would be, maybe a 8 or 9 win team potentially. We didn't anticipate the defense being terrible for so long, or not even close to as bad as they were.
Right. Yeah. They reached a rock bottom that I don't think we knew existed.
But take a couple of those non-conference games that should have been wins, honestly, if the defense was even just a little bit below average instead of absolutely horrendous, then we're kind of where we thought they would be at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be interesting to go back if we could have played Boston College, in December, then maybe it's a different story.
That would have actually been a great game because they would have gotten their quarterback back as well.
That's true.
So that might have added some extra intrigue. I kind of wish we would have played that game later in the season, but yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, you could probably say the same thing for the Florida game too. I mean, a couple of games could have gone against Missouri too that ended fortunately. So I was just happy to see Missouri get bowl eligible around mid-season. I probably would have told you it's impossible. So I was happy for Missouri to get to a bowl. Seems like hopefully the best days are still yet to come.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Okay, so yeah, leave us a comment or tell us what you think about the football season as a whole. Did it meet your expectations? Is the record understandable considering some of the unknowns and how they turned out this year? Let us know what you think.
It's crazy how at one point in the season I would have said get Steve Wilkes out of here immediately.
Yeah. And
by the end of the season I'm saying hold on to Steve Wilkes like with everything you can, because I think at this point he's proved that after the some of the changes they made and with the performance improving on the field, I think Steve Wilkes will be a great hire when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Between now and next episode, I'm gonna like look at the individual game performances and like the rushing yardage and just the defensive play from the first half to the second half of the season, and then I think that'll maybe illustrate how much better it got.
Yeah.
Even though the season total stats still look pretty bad, just because of how awful it was at the beginning. If you didn't know, Missouri's defense was bad for a while there.
Why can we never get the defense and the offense to be good at the same time? Is my question.
One of these days.
When was the last time that happened? Like 2013 or something? Like just craziness.
Feels like it, yeah. Okay, ready to switch gears to basketball?
No, I think that's the end of the episode.
Well, too bad. Missouri played Kentucky last night. They lost that game 83-56. And honestly, Kentucky didn't play all that well on offense. They shot I don't know. They were not as efficient shooting from the field as they typically are, and they still won by 20-something. They were able to kind of mask those that not awesome shooting night by getting to the free throw line 26 times and making 22 of them. But they were under 50% from 2, under 30% from 3. But fortunately for Kentucky, Missouri was much worse than that shooting the ball. Missouri was 40% from 2 and 20% from 3 and only attempted 10 free throws. And that's what's gonna happen. That's gonna make you score 56 points in a game.
Yeah, it seems like Missouri is often on the wrong side of fouls called. Just in total numbers, it seems like they foul other teams a lot more than they get fouled, and I don't know if that's just a result of being out-athleted a lot of the times, which is definitely the case last night, and notably against Kansas. It seemed like those fouls were very lopsided as well. I mean, that's just something that when you can't shoot and you're not very good at defense, like, you can't be that lopsided in the foul game in a negative way.
Yeah, and it's when you look at the box score, Missouri attempted 25 three-pointers to Kentucky's 17.
Yeah.
So Kentucky's a pretty good three-point shooting team, and they still were like, no, we're not going to settle for that when we can score inside and get to the free throw line.
Yeah, they're able to adapt, which we talked about that last week. That's usually a sign of a good team or a good coach that's able to be successful in multiple ways and adapting to your strengths, and that seems to be something that Missouri never does.
Right.
They just hope and pray that someday they're going to figure out how to make a three-pointer consistently.
Yeah. There's no reason this Missouri team should be shooting 25 threes at this point in the season. We know that's not going to be a successful way to go about things.
Okay, well, tell me this. What's more ridiculous? Missouri shooting 25 threes or Jordan Wilmore playing a single minute? What's more ridiculous?
Well, I think, honestly, shooting 25 threes is more ridiculous at this point. Jordan Wilmore played exactly 1 minute and committed 2 fouls.
Yeah.
And
they're just gonna keep throwing him in there, see what happens, and then pulling him in 1 minute whenever he is terrible.
Yeah, what's the point of that?
I don't know.
I guess I see it as basically harmless when it's just 1 minute. It's just easy to disregard it as like something that doesn't really matter.
I guess, but it just indicates that they're just hoping and praying on things that are dead.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true.
Which both of those things are. The three-point shooting, too.
Yeah.
And sorry, Jordan Wilmore, if you heard
that. Let's see here. Kentucky did exactly what we would have expected them to do, but just like a little bit worse version of what they're capable of. Like, Wheeler still had 9 assists. Tshiebwe still had 20 rebounds. And their role players just kind of stepped up and made baskets when they needed it. And
yeah, they struggled, but still just found ways to get it done.
Yeah.
And maybe other ways that they wouldn't normally do it. Yeah, Tshiebwe, it seemed like he had not a very good game in his standards, still 13 and 20.
Yeah.
20 rebounds.
Well, he was 9 for 10 from the free throw line.
Yep.
So I think he only made 2 shots from the field. I think he was 2 for 10 shooting, but made up for it by getting to the line.
Now, at times it seemed like Missouri was in this game for just brief moments in time, and then all of a sudden they weren't. I wonder why it seems, at least lately, it seems like Missouri tends to go on really good stretches and then terrible stretches. Like, their games are just filled with a bunch of runs, good and bad.
And the bad stretches are
worse.
5 times worse than than the good stretches.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly what happened in this game. And they went on a little 12-0 run, and it's like, okay, they're going to maybe be competitive. No, I didn't actually think this. I promise you.
They took the lead at one point in the first half, like late in the first half, right? Maybe midway through.
Yeah. Around the 10-minute mark, it was very close. They went up 18-17. Kentucky took the lead, made it 19-18, and that sparked a 25-4 Kentucky run. So it went from 19-18 to 42-22 towards the end of the first half there. And then Missouri battled back. They didn't really go on a second half run, but they just kind of chipped away at Kentucky's lead and actually looked like they could actually do something. But Kyle, I'm here to tell you that was fake. That was not real. All it was Kentucky not making baskets for a little while. And Missouri got it down to a 10-point game. Kentucky went on a little 14-0 run, and that gives you your final score of 83-56. So, I mean, it's kind of a broken record thing at this point. When other teams start to struggle a little bit on offense, Missouri's defense is just good enough to, chip away to lead. But Missouri's offense is so bad that they can't actually score when the other team is having a little bit of a drought or a dry spell. And so opportunities just get squandered. And then the Missouri's opponent wakes up and goes on a big run, puts the game away. And I'm going to look back at I said in the preview episode that I thought the Kansas, Illinois, and this Kentucky game, those combined margins of defeat would be pretty impressive. So I'm going to go back and look at previous seasons and see how that stacks up to like the 3 greatest losses or margins of defeat in Missouri seasons past. See how it stacks up.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, this might be one of the tougher games on Missouri's conference slate, right? I mean, at Kentucky, that's a very difficult way to start conference season.
And I think Kentucky's going to be right there at the top of the SEC. I think they're going to be competing for the regular season championship.
I agree.
A top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not going to say that I was encouraged by anything in this game, but I guess at times in the game it felt like Missouri held their own. I just wish they could figure out how to. They lost by like 25 points. I'm saying they held their. I just wish they could like minimize the just terrible stretches. Like for a lot of the games, they were fine, but they just lose grip of everything, just for a certain point of time.
The terrible stretches are 90% just missing every shot.
Yeah,
which is just incredible. Like.
Kentucky scored a lot in transition in this game too.
They did, and transition and the free throw line was
transition from missed shots.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was listening to the radio broadcast and they were talking. They said at one point they mentioned Mike Kelly was like, "Well, and back-to-back turnovers for the Tigers," and then he was like, "Wait, the first one wasn't a turnover; it was a missed 3 that they just took
the long rebound.
Yeah, long rebound transition basket.
Yep.
But yeah, basically the same thing." I guess Brazil looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's the bright spot.
He's something at the 5 spot, and that's a huge surprise for me, honestly.
Hope and pray that whoever the coach is next season finds a way to retain Trayvon Brazil.
Yeah. And, spoiler alert, there is going to be a new coach next year, right? Like
yeah, I think so.
We can't. It's so early in the season to be talking about this.
I know. We're in a strange predicament.
But, yeah, like the Mizzou basketball fan base is in a strange predicament. We're literally in a strange predicament with this podcast in that.
We have to talk about it.
Yeah, we're basically like we're openly discussing the fact that we think most likely Konzo will not be back next year. We agree that that's what should happen, but we still have over half of a basketball season.
Is there any chance this team can improve? And if so, how?
Okay, here's an idea I have to maybe see some improvement. Let's find 5 players. I would prefer younger players, and let's give them the bulk of the minutes in a few games in a row and see how it goes. Because in the Kentucky game, we had, I'm counting real quick, we had 6 players play between 24 and 26 minutes. We had 1 more guy at 22 minutes, 2 more guys at 11 minutes. And then 3 others that played single-digit, just nonsense garbage minutes.
So you're maybe proposing there's too many people playing?
Too many people playing, and it's too even across the top 9 guys. So by contrast, Kentucky, in a game that they had pretty well in hand multiple times, they had 4 players play 30 minutes or more. 1 more played 27 minutes. Everybody else was 15 or less. And you might argue like none of the players are good enough to warrant getting 30 minutes a game. But first of all, if you're not playing Kobe Brown 30 plus minutes a game, you're doing something wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a follow-up to that, but keep going.
So I just would like to see the coaching staff try to find 6 guys that they like the most, and let's roll with them for 30 plus minutes a game for a few games in a row and see what happens.
Now, Cornell Mann was the acting head coach last night because Konzo has COVID.
Yeah.
After the game, Cornell Mann was asked why Kobe Brown was not playing in the first half when I don't really think he was in foul trouble. And he basically, I'm trying to find the quote here, but, Cornell Mann on sitting Kobe Brown, this is Dave Matter on Twitter, Cornell Mann on sitting Kobe Brown in the first half after the second foul. Cornell Mann says, if you're going to win the game, you need to save him for the second half in hopes he'll come back out and play well.
So, yeah, set him, during that 25-4 run and just make sure he's ready to come back. And
yeah, and he single-handedly will spark like a 30-0 run for Missouri.
Yeah. He'll be fresh to dig him out of a 20-point hole in the second half.
It's a tough spot. I mean, there's no good answers for anything in a tough game.
I'll tell you what, an answer that I would have been okay with is, looking back on it, I should have just kept Kobe in there.
Yeah, he should have said, what do you want me to do, man? That's what he should have said. None of these players are very good. We can't make a shot. What do you want me to do, Dave? That's what he should have said.
Yeah. Yeah, that's regardless, you kept him fresh, but he still played 24 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a good point, though. Shave down the amount of people that are playing. Yeah. Play your best 8 players.
There's a lot. Yes. There's a little bit too much platooning. There's a little bit too much spreading the minutes out. And I can understand nobody's stepping up. Mm-hmm. So spread the minutes out and try to see if somebody can really do something with their opportunity.
Yeah, and as weird as it sounds, and as obvious as it sounds, just ride the hot hand. It seems like sometimes he'll do a platoon switch out whenever a group is playing well, and it kind of kills momentum. So I think, we're splitting hairs for a team that's not very good here, just talking about substitutions and stuff. But I think there are ways that personnel-wise they can improve.
Yeah, and I say play the younger guys more.
Play Brazil 35 minutes a game.
For sure. Not ironically do that. and Brookshire, let him be your point guard. Yeah. It's not going to be worse than, what we've been getting out of the point forwards that we've been trotting out there. Let's see if I have anything else fun to say about this game. Ronnie DeGray was your best offensive player. He had 8 points on 6 field goal attempts. Coleman and Davis both scored 10, but did it pretty inefficiently. That drops Missouri down to 6-7 overall on the season, 0-1 now with 1 SEC game under their belt. They've dropped to 157 in KenPom, and they've hit the number you thought they would hit, 201 on offense, 124 on defense. 355th out of 358 in 3-point field goal percentage offense.
Do you think they'll ever hit the 358 mark in 3-point shooting? I wonder how far away they are from the last place team. I don't know if you can.
I'll look it up. Yeah, I'll find it. They keep shooting 20%. It'll happen.
They'll be there.
Yeah.
At the amount of times they're shooting.
Yeah. Let's see here. 3-point field goal percentage. Oh, you know what? Since I last looked, there's been a shakeup.
Oh, no.
They've jumped way up there. Now 330th.
So in 3-point shooting?
Yeah, so some teams really...
that is a massive jump.
The KenPom's database must have updated recently. Oh, this doesn't make any sense. It's showing me 356th on their team page. But when I look at the whole list... Oh, no, we're there.
It's got to be 356.
356.
Yeah.
South Florida and Florida A&M are the only teams lower. So Missouri's at 23.8%, South Florida is at 23. Florida A&M is at 22.8. So we're just 1 percentage point away from last in all of college basketball.
But at least all the guys on the roster are tough.
They are tough. That is true. And they're positionless. Next up, we play Mississippi State at home. Mississippi State is 10-3 with wins over top 60 teams, Richmond and Arkansas. And they lost to all of their losses are to top 100 teams: Louisville, Minnesota, and Colorado State. So, and some familiar names on the Mississippi State roster. Iverson Molinar, he has had good games against Missouri in the past. And then they also have a transfer from Memphis, DJ Jeffries, who is a pretty solid forward. Mississippi State's 36th in KenPom, 25th on offense, 62nd on defense. I think Molinar and Jeffries are kind of like their two go-to guys. They've also got a big man named Garrison Brooks, who I think will just eat up a bunch of rebounds again, like we've been seeing big guys do against Missouri. He's not as big as Tshiebwe or Kofi Coburn.
Or Jordan Wilmore.
He's not as big as Jordan Wilmore either. So maybe we have a mismatch there we can exploit. Mississippi State also has a player named Rocket Watts, who Missouri recruited out of high school back in 2018, and he went to Michigan State and has now transferred to Mississippi State. Not playing a whole lot, but he has come off the bench a few times for them. What do you think? Top 50 team, but we get them at home. They're pretty good on offense. Very slow tempo team, Mississippi State.
Yeah.
So maybe there's an opportunity to hang around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that it's possible Missouri can hang around in this game. I don't think Mississippi State is a tremendously good team. I think they are very good, though. They're very tough. But in a different way than Missouri is. And
they're the kind of tough that wins basketball games.
That's exactly right. I think Mississippi State will win this game, but I think that Missouri can keep it within 10 or 12.
Yeah. KenPom says Mississippi State by 7. That seems a little generous. Mississippi State's just really solid in just about everything. Play with a slow tempo, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if they can own it. So maybe Missouri can...
Seems like they've been bad against Mississippi State, even when they're good, though.
That's true.
Mississippi State has our number. Those Mississippi schools in general.
Yeah, it does kind of seem that way. If Missouri can get out in transition, maybe force Mississippi State to play a little bit faster than they would like, then maybe they'll get something going.
Eliminate the bad stretches.
Yeah, just eliminate them, Kyle says.
Yeah, easier said than done, right? Just get rid of bad play. Seriously, though, I mean, you got to figure out how to mitigate those 25-4 runs like we had against Kentucky. I mean, it seems so obvious, but
yeah,
you got to call a timeout or something.
Well, they do a thing where the game starts to get away, and then you see Kobe Brown just bringing the ball up and going ISO. And he did that a few times in the Kentucky game where he just forced a drive, which, when it comes down to
sometimes it works.
You got to try something.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of forcing a drive, looking for contact. And I honestly think that college referees, when they see a guy just kind of bulldoze his way to the rim, obviously just trying to draw a foul, they're less likely to call it sometimes. But I don't know. Missouri on offense just seems so scattered and not cohesive at all. Not running an offense with any kind of flow or anything. It's just
5 individuals just kind of hoping.
And when they do execute, good passes and find an open man and make the extra pass and stuff, it looks really good.
And they miss.
Well, they do typically miss, but at least they set the guy up pretty well sometimes. I don't know what else to say about this basketball team. It's gonna be a struggle, but we'll be here for each and every game, and it's still fun to see, like what we have for the future, I guess.
Yeah, assuming that those guys stick around.
Yeah, but also nobody is going to think it's the end of the world if none of them do.
Well, I do think that at the end of the season, we will have some fun things to talk about the future, and maybe a breath of fresh air. But until that moment, we will keep talking about these games.
Sounds good. Are we done here? Hope everybody had a good Christmas. Merry Christmas to the Patreon guest pickers. Congratulations again for getting on the trophy. Hope everybody has a happy new year. And special thank you to our Patreon supporters at the $10 level and above: Britt Treese, Brian Smith, Ryan Lee, Tristan, Ben Smith, Parker, Daddy JD, Luis Hernandez, and Tim Keynes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
You can find our t-shirts and stickers on our online shop, MissouriSportsPod.BigCartel.com. I
didn't specifically say, but I do think Missouri's going to lose to Mississippi State.
Oh, okay, thanks for filling us in.
But that'd be nice if they won. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next week.